we'll start over again because the mic wasn't on. Need all the help I can get. Good evening. This is the regular meeting, March 1, 2018, regular meeting of the Harbor Advisory Board, and we're meeting in the Veterans Memorial Building. We have a quorum present. All of our members are present this evening, so we have a quorum, and please observe a moment of silence. Thank you. So, Pledge of Allegiance. Lynn?
Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Indivisible. Would that that were true. So the next item on the agenda is the Chair, Advisory Board Member, and Liaison announcements and or presentations. Our liaison is not yet with us this evening, Mr. Makowetsky, so we'll start. Bill?
Yeah, I'd like to update the public and the board here on the status of the Sea Lion dock. Jeremiah Jacobs has started the framing at the boathouse. I saw some pictures of it today. I will be purchasing the final elements of the dock tomorrow at Haywood Lumber, and that should be delivered next week. So we are in progress. Ron Reisner here helped us tremendously in giving us some guidance, and we appreciate that, Ron. Thank you. So I will update you, and hopefully maybe the next meeting I'll have some pictures of where we are. And I thank the public. The public was very generous. We were able to raise approximately $22,000, and we'll have a first-class Sea Lion dock.
And Bill, when you say you will be purchasing, you're doing that as the Friends of...
Yeah, I apologize. I'm president of the Friends of the Morro Bay Harbor Department, and for anyone who doesn't know, we are the nonprofit, and our mission statement and our mission is to provide supplemental funding for the Harbor Department, which is what we have been doing for the last 3 years. And this is a project that really came to fruition, and it's been an exciting project, and so I'm very happy to help the Harbor Department in purchasing this, because they did not have to use any of their funds, and they didn't have enough to really build a good dock, so this really helped out tremendously. So thank you.
Dana? Microphone?
First of all, I would like to take a moment and just remember Jim Phillips, who was on our Harbor Advisory Board. He passed away early this week, or no, the end of last week, I'm sorry. And he was also involved in the Yacht Club and the Rams for Men. I'm not really aware of that, but whatever Jim took on, he took it on seriously. He went all the way through the details. He was a bar steward. He was just most recently the chair of the membership committee. So not just the older members, but all the newer members. He guided them through the process and into the club, so he was well known. He was also my Commodore when I was Vice Commodore. And then he also talked me into taking this job. So I knew Jim pretty good. He was a great guy. And I think you, who have been on the board for a while, know him pretty well. And I just wanted to say that. Also, there will be a memorial service at the Yacht Club later this month. It was in the obit, which you can find in the Tribune. Another thing, I was asked to give an update on the Maritime Museum. We talked about the power that they're trying to put in, and they're still working on that. And they've talked to PG&E just recently that probably mid-April, late May, possibly getting that hooked up off of the pole there. The end of this month, the cable is going to be coming in. The water, trying to work out a deal because the Maritime Museum, the property in front of it, they're creating a city park there along with their building. And so they're looking at the city, working with the city to get them to bring the water over to that area for irrigation. They're going to be putting together a new website in a couple weeks, so look for that. And they're always looking for memorabilia. They still have quite a ways to go to fill that building. They have quite a bit, but they're looking for a lot more, and obviously donations for a lot of things, just display cases, and they'd like to put a weather station on there. And so, feel free to go by the Maritime Museum, and all the information is there on how to donate. And you can also get a hold of Larry Newland through me or probably anybody else around here. The other big thing is you probably read in the Bay News about a huge anchor that was donated by Bertha Tyler that was out in her yard, 8,000 pounds sitting in front of the place right now. So can't really miss the Maritime Museum. And having worked there, there's people that come there first thing in the morning. We show up, and there's people looking at the sub, they're looking at the tugboat, and at the end of the day, there's people still doing that. I mean, talk about a consistent tourist attraction every single day. I didn't go by there today, but it was a little windy. I don't know if they were there. It's definitely a landmark now.
Dana, are there any plans to elevate the stock on Bertha's anchor?
Yes, there is. There's quite a few different ideas, but yes, that is something that we want to do in concrete, and so that it stands up straight. There's a whole lot of projects that still need to go on. It looks like the building's done, but there's still a whole lot to do. Any more questions? Okay.
Thank you. Neil?
None for me.
Okay. Lynn?
Yes, first off, I happened to be out in the bay and at very low tide yesterday driving past Tidelands Park, and was very pleased to see how much eelgrass is growing down in front of Tidelands and in places where we really don't mind that it grows. It's not necessarily only in places where people are using or having access to the water, but it seems to be spreading quite well all by itself. Maybe the disaster is at least partially alleviated. Secondly, I know Eric is going to be talking about it in his status report.
Well, that's your phone. There's always one. You better answer.
Holy moly!
I heard that. That hurt it. Gets attention again.
I think you gotta stand up and dance. Somebody call him.
Anyway, the new California voting card is going into effect. It will be required for kids under 18 and under in the first year, and then over the next few years it will eventually be required of all voters. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary Flotilla 761 is giving classes that will help you pass the test and get your California voting card. Don't know the exact date, but it's probably going to be in April. Late April or early May will be the next one. There is contact information with Danny Hart, Danny at yphoto.com, or his telephone number 805-776-2727. 3389. If you are interested in taking a full one-day course, it runs from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. It's very comprehensive, and it's not a hands-on course. It is a lecture course covering all of the topics that are needed to get the voter safety card.
Lynn, do you know whether it costs money to get the voter safety card?
No, I was going to look that up. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I don't know. Eric, do you know? I think the card is free, isn't it?
There's a bunch of online courses you can take in the free.
Yeah. There's online. The courses cost money, but the card itself.
Yeah, you actually have to take the course to pass it.
Yeah.
I've done it a couple times, and this has been brewing for a better part of a decade almost now. But, for anybody that's been involved in voting, if you've got general knowledge, you've been around.
Microphone.
Microphone. What's that?
He says no.
For anybody that's been around voting, and
We can hear you.
especially people that have licenses, captain's licenses, I won't say it's easy to pass, but it's pretty straightforward online course.
Nevertheless, some people may be interested in taking this U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary course for voter safety.
Anything else, Lynn?
Nope, that's all for me.
Jeremiah?
Yeah, I just wanted everybody to know that we have been asked, the Morro Bay Commercial Fishermen's Organization has been asked on a few occasions to issue a statement on our position on offshore oil. So one of the last people asked was the mayor, as a matter of fact. So it was read into a resolution, so we did supply our position. It was read into a resolution, which is resolution number 07-18, City Council in the City of Morro Bay, California. And without going through the whole paper, which involves other issues, but it does state, whereas the Morro Bay Commercial Fishermen's Organization stands opposed to any new offshore oil development off of our California coast. So that includes the whole coast, not just Morro Bay here. And I did want to mention that there was another Jim who passed away here recently too, and a lot of people know him up from the Riddell's Smokehouse up in Cayucas. And Jim was a great, wonderful member of the community, as was Jim Phillips, who was previously on the Harbor Advisory Board. And so anyways, our heart goes out to their families. They're wonderful, wonderful people. Also, it's very, very nice to hear that Bertha from the aquarium here in Morro Bay donated that anchor. That's quite a gift. You don't come by them every day, and it's a wonderful thing. She's obviously keeping up the goodwill that family's always shown to our community. That's it.
Thank you. Gene?
Yes, on February 17th and 18th, the Estero Bay Surf Club had their 28th annual Big Bad and Ugly Surf Contest. Saturday, it was fun, 3 to 6 foot. Lots of people. We had over 200 people entering the contest from up and down the state. Sunday afternoon, it turned ugly. Maybe 8 to 10 foot, probably blowing 30 to 40 miles an hour. But what was most impressive was watching the kids. The surf club was getting older, and some of us were dying off. But to see the new kids, we've got a whole crop of new kids, and I am so impressed with them. The Morro Bay High School surf team was involved in it, and the new members of the Estero Bay Surf Club. To see these kids out there in terrible looking surf, and they're surfing without leashes, they're losing their boards, they're running the nose, they're hanging 10, and then they're body surfing all the way in. And this is the boys and girls, or men's and women's, and then they're paddling back out and just having a ball. I was so impressed with that. And then the second item I'd like to bring up is we've got a little front coming through here tonight, and I'd recommend if you have a boat out of mooring, go out tomorrow to check your lines, because that's when they wear it out. So that's what I've got so far.
Thank you. I have a couple of things in no particular order. On March 9 at the Community Center is the 29th Dixon's Spaghetti Dinner. It's a fundraiser, and as well as a community event, but all the funds raised are used to assist children from financially challenged families to participate in the Morro Bay Rec Department's youth, sports, and recreation programs. So I encourage everybody to come out. There are lots of events. There's some kids events. There's a silent auction. In addition to the spaghetti dinner, there will also be a no-host bar for beer and wine. So look forward to seeing everybody there. It is augmented through that event is augmented through the Community Foundation of Estero Bay, which is a local 501c3. Number two, the field work for the Maureen Field GPS mapping will take place, weather permitting, this month. A very nice young lady from Cal Poly, from one of their programs out there, has agreed to do the mapping, and that mapping the software that they're using will be able to talk to the cities. I'm having a moment. Eric, what does the city call its Anyway, the cities. Yeah, that's okay. Well, I feel better anyway because you're a lot younger than I am. So that the city has a GPS mapping program for the entire city, and so this will be able to talk to it. Thank you, Gene. GSI. Thank you, Gene. Say it into the mic. Say it into the mic.
Geographical information system.
Turn your mic on.
Is that what we're talking about? Yeah. GIS.
And it stands for what, please?
Geographical Information Systems.
Perfect. Thank you. That's great. Number three, on April 6, 7, and 8 is the Morro Bay Citywide Yard Sale. That is an event that is sponsored and promoted, or sponsored and organized, is promoted by many, including the city, by Morro Bay Beautiful, another 501c3 here in town. It's only been around for 25 years now. The important part of that announcement is that if you want to become a seller in the citywide yard sale, which has been, depending on the year, somewhere between 150 and 300 sales attended from people all over the state, quite literally, you need to sign up at the Chamber of Commerce within the next 18 days. There's a deadline because there's a map and it's got to be published in the newspaper, and so you got 18 days to go to the chamber and sign up if you want to be a seller. It's a very, very modest fee, whatever it's 10, I don't know. I'm not even going to say it was a very modest fee. Next, there are funds available for replacement of old marine engines. On January 24, the San Luis Obispo County Air Pollution Control District Board, it's a mouthful, approved $728,327 to help local businesses and residents clean up old tractors, agricultural irrigation engines, commercial marine vessels, construction equipment, and so on. That board, the APCD, is now taking applications for that funding program. Funding for these, quote, emission reduction projects, end quote, comes from state-allocated, quote, Carl Moyer grant funds and locally generated DMV registration funds. Specific funding available for these eligible emission reduction project categories to include commercial marine vessels within SLO County has $198,327, which is available for various and sundry equipment, including marine engines. And application forms and more information can be found online at slowcleanair.org, or there's a number you can call. It's I don't anticipate anybody's going to write this down, but I'll say it twice, 805-781-5912. That's 805-781-5912. If you have an old engine and you're interested in some grant funds to replace it. Grant funds are awarded on, this is them talking, not me. Grant funds are awarded on a first-come, first-served basis to qualifying projects, quote, based on the dates when APCD deems the submitted applicants to be complete. End quote. I take that to read first-come, first-served.
Ron, is this diesel and gas, or do you know?
It was unclear. Eric may know the answer to that. I know it's for diesels, but when I read it, it just said engines.
Yeah, my understanding, it's generally been diesel. It's commercial, but it's most commercial, it's diesel.
Well, not all.
Worth looking into if you're gasoline and commercial.
Yeah. All they can do is tell you no. Let's see. I think that's it for me, so that means that's it for the board. Our liaison, Mr. Makowetsky, is with us. Mr. Matt, you got anything for us?
Hello, yes, Matt Makowetsky, City Council, Morro Bay. First, I'd like to kind of like echo what Gene was talking about with the Estero Bay Surf Club. The weekend with the surf event was, first of all, we lucked out weather-wise. It was absolutely incredible. But the event with, on one hand, you can say, wow, there was 200 surfers from different surf clubs, but however, it was much bigger than that. And looking at it, and I happened to be there for a lot of the weekend, but I think in the bigger picture, in terms of the HAB, in terms of the Friends of the Harbor, this was a huge shoulder season event. And in terms of the different events we have in terms of tourism, bringing people to Morro Bay, and as Gene was talking about, the various ages of the people involved, this was very much of a Morro Bay cultural event. And in terms of the various events we have throughout the year, this was very significant. And to watch it, I mean, I was there quite a bit, and just watching various stages of it, I would like to say beyond kudos to the Estero Bay Surf Club, but to the harbor, and then the importance from to the Friends of the Harbor, everybody involved. It was just an incredible event to watch. We lucked out weather-wise. It was like Morro Bay TV the whole time, and then the white noise came on at the end when the wind came up. So absolutely incredible. Number two, just I want to come back to Gene. Gene asked me during the weekend about one item for Morro Bay City Council, and that was the fire pits at the Rock. Right now we have one fire pit at the Rock, and so investigating that, Gene wanted to report back to Harbor, was that there are plans or the materials have been bought for those fire pits. The item is coming back to City Council for discussion to talk about how those will be or can be placed. And so right now it's kind of in a holding pattern until we have that discussion with City Council, how and if those will be placed.
Thank you for following up on that.
Sure, totally. And so I didn't want to just necessarily just call you back, but I wanted to come to Harbor and say, Eric, do you think that's a fair assessment of how the process will go? Okay, great. And that's it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to a public comment. So this is for public comment for anything that is not on the agenda, or for those who may not be able to stay for a declared agenda item later on. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, that takes us to our consent calendar. Item A1, which is approval of the minutes from the regular Harbor Advisory Board meeting that was held on December 7, 2017. I need a motion in order for us to discuss this. A motion to approve? Motion to approve by Jeremiah. Is there a second?
Second.
A chorus of seconds. I think I heard Lynn first. And so any discussion? Any corrections, additions? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor of approving those minutes from December 7th, 2017? Aye. Opposed? None. Carries unanimously. The next item is A2, which is approval of minutes from the special Harbor Advisory Board meeting that was held on January 11, 2018. I need a motion to approve. Mr. LaFay, and second. Jeremiah. And any discussion? Everybody okay with those minutes? Any additions, notes? Seeing none? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None? Carries. So that brings us to B1, which is the Harbor Department status report. Mr. Endersby.
Thank you and good evening. Okay, recent department activity. First item up, as always, Harbor Patrol statistics. To date, from our last meeting, we've had 9 emergency responses. Fortunately, it's been, knock on wood, fairly quiet in the last few months. 77 calls for service and 22 assists, 28 enforcement contacts and 3 weather warnings and 1 hazardous bar. As you know, it's been a pretty mild winter and not a lot of big surf, so that's keeping our boating up and our drama down. On the enforcement end, I will say Harbor Patrol is taking a concerted effort over the next couple of months to go through and ensure folks' boats are registered. I think a lot of people keep their boats registered currently, but they don't put their stickers on. Well, you've got to have your sticker on too. And I see we have a guilty party in the audience here. So just a reminder to everybody out there in boating land, make sure, if you're on the waters of California, your boat has to be either CF registered through the state of California or documented through the U.S. Coast Guard. If you're CF registered with the state, make sure you got your current sticker on there. And if you're not current, go get it registered because you can be cited and you may be cited. So go ahead and take care of that and we'd appreciate it. As far as notable incidents recently, like I say, it's been fairly quiet. We've had a couple climbers on the rock. On the 11th, we had a report from the Coast Guard that saw somebody. We were never able to find them. I'm sure they were up there. Somebody was up, but they must have scrambled down before anybody got out there. And then a few days later, on the 14th, another climber was reported. He was located and brought back down and counseled by state parks and the police department and released. But fortunately, that one ended well. As you know, some of these climbers on the rock have not ended so well. So just a reminder to people out there, it's not the best place in the world to go climbing, so don't do it. Recent City Council activity. The City Council had a goals retreat, goal and objectives retreat back on February 2 and discussed strategic planning process and many goals, and took last year's goals and basically put them into the sausage making machine to figure out what we're going to do for this upcoming budget year, threw new goals in there and sort of revamped the process. The process involving all the advisory bodies is no longer in the goal setting, at least for this year. That's not to say I'm not going to be bringing things from the goals to the Harbor Advisory Board. I certainly will when they are pertinent, but we don't have that whole separate advisory body goal setting process. And then those goals were adopted on Tuesday night. Council heard the report of all the goals summated, and I don't have them here to report on them, but you can go online and find it. The council gave some direction and did some changes to them, but they did adopt the goals last night. So last set of goals, we were 10 goals and 80 some odd objectives. We're now down to, what are we, 4 or 5 goals and low 30s in the objective number. So much more attainable number. I think the previous goal setting was a little too ambitious and got us going in too many directions. So hopefully now we're focused on some things that we can really get done. Then on February 13th, City Council, Council gave direction on 3 items that were Harbor Advisory Board items, some of our revenue generators. One was the boat/RV storage in the Triangle parking lot, and the other was 2 sets of licensing or permitting, one for businesses operating on the bay, such as boat bottom cleaners, maintenance people, marine surveyors and such, sort of boat and bay service type businesses. And then the other was activities occurring on harbor properties. The example we gave was a company called Beach Butlers that puts on weddings and corporate retreats and other things on our beach for profit. And so took that in front of council. All 3 items, the boat RV storage was to be continued. Council gave some input. They had some concerns with some of the issues, but wanted a little more detail developed on that. So we'll be bringing that back to the council once we develop a little more what we're looking for. And on the licensing and permitting issues, they were okay in concept with the staff recommendation, which was largely what came through the HAB and what the HAB recommended. But they still wanted a little more development of those 2 processes as well, and for us to develop policy and bring the policy back, which we'll be doing. So we did make a little progress on those, which was good. And so hopefully sometime this spring we'll get that back in front of the City Council and get those ones wrapped up. On this staff report, they were saying tentatively on the February 27th council meeting, but now the 27th meeting has taken place. And as Jeremiah said, the council did adopt Resolution 0718, taking opposition stance against offshore oil drilling and exploration and fracking. Also at that meeting, we gave them an update on our CMB, which is a California Marine Affairs and Navigation Conference trip to Washington, D.C., which occurs next week. There is a, how many, 5 people is what? 4 people is a quartet. How many is 5? Quintet. There's a quintet of us going on Sunday, flying out Sunday to Washington, D.C. Myself, the mayor, Councilman Heading, City Manager Collins, and Public Services Director Rob Livick. Rob's going all for water treatment plant stuff. Mr. Heading is kind of a mix. Mr. Collins is kind of a mix. And myself and the mayor are primarily doing all dredging and CMB type harbor stuff. So council reviewed some draft letters to our Congress folks and our congressional delegation and others, and gave some general direction on that trip, and we gave them an update on what's happening. So we'll be able to report back in March, or actually in April, the next meeting in April, how that all went. We got a lot on our plate. We're taking, I say, the usual dredging, a bunch of fisheries issues, marine sanctuary issues and concerns, the new oil position, be going to BOEM, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, and talking to them about the Trident Winds proposal. A bunch of good meetings we'll be having, so it's going to be a busy week. And also on the 27th, the council considered mid-year budget approval and adjustments, and approved most everything, but we didn't have the resolution to go along, so it's having to come back in the next meeting in March. But the council did generally adopt a mid-year budget with a few adjustments. Our adjustments were about $19,000 increase to revenues based on the trending of a couple of our revenue lines, and about $15,000 increase to some of our expenditures to make up for some shortages we're seeing in our utilities, where our utilities are coming in higher than anticipated. And so net about $4,000, $4,500 to the positive, which is good. So, and we'll be asking to put another $20,000 towards our ice machine as well. So that was all good. Any questions? Go to the next page.
Before you move on, going back to the climbers on the rock, does the department feel that there's adequate signage?
There is. State Parks has got, I don't know, every 50, 75 feet, little signs. I mean, they're not bright orange, the most visible things in the world, but there's only a couple access points up, and I think there's adequate signage. They could, I'll take that back. There probably should be a sign, and I don't know that there is, along the Fisherman's Trail, the one that's above kind of the outfall, the old outfall, that one that goes behind the fence. There may not be any signage up on that side. There probably should be. It's a good point. We'll look at it.
And as it relates to the items that you brought before council and reported on, do any of those items need any additional work on or input on the part of the Harbor Advisory Board?
In terms of the goals, or in terms of which items?
No, the parking and licensing and permitting, and the 3 things that you brought before council.
I don't think the licensing and permitting, those 2 items do. They just wanted policy. Possibly, they just wanted policy development on paper. We've got the idea and concept, but as far as the parking, probably, those will probably warrant another spin through the advisory body, through the advisory board. Yeah. There are concerns there. One was management and exact placement of it and how it would work. Another was with the trash enclosures that GAFCO and Harbor Hut currently have, and moving those, and a couple other things. So yeah, it probably warrants coming back around.
Okay. And as far as the goals and objectives, are the ones that, they've been ratified by council now formally, as you reported, are they all collected in one portion of the goal of the published goals and objectives? That's not very clear. Are the harbor related goals and objectives all collected, or are they scattered through? I have not looked.
They're scattered through.
Thanks.
Stuff that's harbor related.
Okay, thank you.
And I imagine they are going to get posted to the city's website before long once the changes get mixed in and then published somewhere. Okay, moving on to the second page. And you had a couple of notes I'm going to bring up. To add on to where Lynn was going with the mandatory boater education, again, as of January 1st, 2018, they're phasing in mandatory boater education in the form of proof of that is a card you have to get, online course that you can take in a bunch of different locations. Like I said, I've taken it. If you've been on the water any length of time, it's pretty straightforward. If you know the ABCs of boating and a few other things, you'll do fine. If not, you can go take courses, as Lynn said, to the Coast Guard Auxiliary and other places. It's being phased in January 1 this year. Any person's 20 or younger have to have it. Next January, it's 25 or younger. January 2020, it's 35. January 2021, it's 40. So it's going in 5-year increments. So those of you that are 60 or younger, you don't have to worry about it until 2024. And then 2025, everybody. So if anybody's over 60, not that we have any of those here, but you got till 2025 to worry about it. We've got a course book here where you can return it to Boating and Waterways. We've got the booklets in our office if you want to come get it. It's got the full book that you can go through the whole thing, take the test, send it in, they'll send it back to you. So plenty of information out there to go ahead and get those courses taken. On the fishing front, probably look to Jeremiah again, but there's fairly slow out front. Dungeness crab season, not real great here. A few guys doing it on a small scale, but I think even up north it's doing okay, but it's not a great year. Pretty slow.
Down everywhere, including Oregon. Yeah.
And Lori looked up the Carl Moyer engine repowering program, and it looks like marine vessel repowers replacement of older, higher polluting marine diesel engines. So it looks like it's diesel only on the marine end. Okay, upcoming events. I'm not going to give a lot of information about these because you can just go online and go to the website of the particular event and find a lot more information than I can possibly give you. But upcoming on the 16th is the Leprechaun Crawl, which is a Morrow Friends of the Harbor Department sponsored event, much like the Santa Crawl we had over Christmas, which turned out to be pretty popular. We'll be doing a Leprechaun Crawl, and I'm assuming it's probably centered around green beer for St. Patrick's Day, I would imagine. So look for that on the Friends of the Morro Bay Harbor Department website. March 18th and 19th, Morro Bay Yacht Club, Big Rock Regatta. Dana, did you forget to mention that one? Probably did last time.
I saw it on here.
So a good yacht club regatta coming up on the 18th and 19th here in town. April 6th through the 8th is the 15th annual Morro Bay Citywide Yard Sale, which has gotten hugely popular all throughout town. I think it's spread over into Los Osos and Cayucas as well. April 15th, Morro Bay Yacht Club opening day, so look to that. And along with that, I believe we do the blessing of the fleet. So look for that in April. On the 21st, Family Care Network 15th Annual Miracle Mile for Kids. That's the great run that takes place from Morro Rock all the way down to the Cayucas Pier for their programs for a good nonprofit event. April 28th, Kite Festival, again presented by the Friends of the Harbor Department. And you guys are all over the place. Another great event, windy hopefully, but hopefully not too windy. May 5th through the 6th, 22nd Annual Cruise and Morro Bay Car Show. That show has grown immensely, too. It's become one of the bigger events, at least in the Central Coast area, if not the state. It's become hugely popular, so look for that up and down Main Street, Morro Bay Boulevard on the May 3rd through the 6th. May 19th to the 25th is National Safe Boating Week. We'll be working and having some activities going on during that, so look for that as we get closer. May 26th through 28th, Memorial Day weekend, Art in the Park up at Morro Bay City Park, so look for that. That's always been a hugely popular event. And finally, July 14th is the 49th Annual Brian Waterbury Rock to Pier Pier Run and Half Marathon, and that is sort of the city's version of the Family Care Network Miracle Mile, so that's another great event where you run from the rock to the pier, and there's also, you can come back and do a half marathon as well. All right, Danny, you got a question?
Just, that's the long day. Yeah, Big Rock Regatta.
What?
It's the 10th and 11th.
Okay,
And,
March 10th and 11th?
yeah.
Okay.
This weekend is the Mustang Regatta.
Cal Poly Mustang Regatta?
This weekend is the Mustang Regatta, so there'll be about, I think, representing at least 9 different universities sailing in that, probably about 30 boats, and we'll be down between the 2 mooring fields. It's a short course, and they just do a whole lot of races. So come support Cal Poly, or possibly your alma mater could be there. And, yeah. The Big Rock, this is the 12th annual Big Rock.
Okay.
We've had up to 90 boats, which if you add their parents and coaches and everybody else, it's a pretty good little bump in the off-season.
Yeah, kind of like the Big Bad and the Ugly, yeah, a little off-season thing. Well, thanks for clarifying all that. And finally,
All right, one question. Bill, do you know anything about 4th of July?
No.
okay, finally, on March 10th, the Rescue Watercraft Association is going to be in town and having an event at the Veterans Memorial Building and proclaiming Morro Bay as the, quote, rescue watercraft training capital of the world, with all the acclaim that that will bring. So K38 Rescue Training has been the company, Sean Eladia, that's trained us since day one, starting probably 15 years ago, and pretty much wrote the book on training. And she's a devout member of the Rescue Watercraft Association, probably a founding member of that organization, and works on jet ski rescue training really around the world. And she's starting probably 10 years ago, started centering all her training here in Morro Bay because we had great facilities and supported the heck out of her and good conditions where she had good challenging conditions on a regular basis that was good for her folks. So she decided to start basing herself out of here, and now she brings Department of Boating and Waterways classes here and brings a lot of her own classes here. So they're going to be coming here on the 10th. So look for that at the Veterans Memorial Building. And then status of pending Harbor Advisory Board recommendations, the matrix chart at the end of our status report. State Park Marina, that we finally got a hold of our new concessionaire person in State Parks and Recreation Department that's handling the concessions at the State Park Marina. So we're re-engaging our discussions with them to see what direction they want to go with that. Because the person we had been dealing with for a bunch of years had retired.
Excuse me, they did contact you, so what did they say?
They want to start engaging in conversation again to figure out which direction we're going to go with it. It took us forever just to get them to come to the surface and say something, so.
Okay. Good first step.
Yeah, a good first step. No, and so I'm trying to cover things on red, but I think something I might have missed on here, but second page, numbers 2, 3, 4, and 5, there's nothing new there, although there is, but I'll cover it. It's Working Waterfront Measure D. I'll cover it when we get to the Measure D Working Waterfront staff report, so I don't need to worry about it there. Eelgrass, I thought I had put something in here. Perhaps I didn't. So Anchor QEA actually just emailed me today. They're ready to start engaging on going forward on their mitigation plan help. So I'll be contacting them probably the week after I get back from Washington, D.C., and figuring out what our first step's going to be with the committee, and we'll start moving forward with them. I think that is all. Yeah, I'll get that on the. Yeah, that's all in the matrix. Like I said, we'll cover Working Waterfront Measure D on Working Waterfront Ad Hoc Committee update. So, any other questions on any of that stuff?
Gene?
No.
Jeremiah?
No.
Lynn?
Yep.
Neil? Dana? Bill?
Yeah. Hey, just curiosity, I mean, if you could clarify to the public and also from my limited brain, what exactly does an emergency response consist of a call for service consists of, and 22 assists of other agencies, and then 26 enforcement contacts. I mean, how are those things monitored? I mean, you don't need to go into depth, but
No, I know.
I'm just curious.
No, it's a good question. So, an emergency response sounds obvious, but basically anything that we're turning on the lights and sirens and getting there fast for. Whether it's a medical aid, that can be a medical aid assisting the fire department. That can be a call mayday from a boat, somebody taken on water or broken down right outside the harbor, to somebody missing in the surf or a surf rescue. Across the board. So anything lights and sirens. 77 calls for service. Calls for service are basically anytime somebody calls us to come help them in a non-emergency basis, whether that's to come tow their boat from point A to point B, help them look for something missing on the beach. It's a broad category, but it's anytime somebody calls us out to help us, to help them for whatever it is. It can be commercial fishermen, asking to have their oil dumped at the oil yard. Lots of different things. Assist of another agency is like state parks and all. If we need to get them over the sand spit to do their snowy plover monitoring, probably the calls to the Rock for the climbers, because the Rock is state parks' jurisdiction. Something else, Parks calls us, or there's some incident down at Morro Strand and it's something on the beach that's maybe not an emergency that wouldn't fall into that category, that'd be assisting another agency. Enforcement contacts, most of the enforcement we do is warn and advise. As you know, we're not badge heavy, and we don't go out and look for citations. It's usually more on a complaint basis, or as we come upon things basis. So enforcement contacts, most of them are warns and advises. Some of these 26 may be, as I spoke earlier, we're ramping up on boat registration to make sure people pay their boat registration. That answer?
Yeah.
All right. Yep.
Eric, during the City Council's, quote, special goals and objectives retreat, end quote, and or during the regular February 13th City Council meeting, did the council address the harbor infrastructure fiscal crisis?
Not during goals, so last Tuesday, this Tuesday of this week, we had a budget sort of study session before the city council meeting that in the presentation from our finance director, Jennifer, she put she had a little chart, not a spreadsheet, but a chart indicating probably the major capital pieces of property or equipment that we have and what their fiscal needs are, kind of summating it. The year it was built, its lifespan, a replaced by year, and then a cost, and totaling up, and that's just for harbor, our building out at the oil yard, our harbor office, our harbor patrol slips, our Dune Street slips, Tylands Park side tie dock, and the launch ramp slips north and south, with a total of $4,170,000. So a small snapshot was placed in front of the council in terms of at least those items, and those items will be expanded upon as we go into the budget process. Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
As it relates to our pending status matrix here, is there reason, in your opinion, if you have one, you don't have to have one, to continue to carry item number 3?
Probably not, in that we did pursue that, and
the need has not gone away.
The need has not gone away.
But the near-term opportunity has.
Right. We did engage consultancy. We did pursue it with Corps of Engineers and tried to get it, see if we could piggyback it onto their project that we just did over the past year. And the regulators and EPA weren't buying, for lack of a better term, the process by which we had proposed to dispose of the dredge material. And so that pretty much financially shut it right back down.
Unless the board objects, I would suggest that we ask the Harbor Department to remove item 3, which is very specific, by the way. It doesn't talk about the need to dredge the marina, which, as I said, and we all know, continues to exist. But it has to do specifically with an action that was already taken and the opportunity went. Is there any objection on the part of the board to asking the department to remove item 3? Neil?
Yeah, I have a question then. That item existed in conjunction with the dredge project that already happened. What's the timeline for the next one? And if it's too far out, I mean, to get it, if this has to get back on the goals list, if we take it off, is it going to miss? Is it going to be harder to get back on the goals list than to keep it on and make it on the next one if it's in a few years? When would the next
We're
opportunity
probably
come around?
5 to 7 years out for another whole harbor dredging like that.
Okay, that's pretty far out.
Yeah, and it's our recommendations, not the city's goals.
Right.
Okay, so we'll ask the department to please remove number 3.
Okay.
That brings me to what is the specific status, please, of item number 6?
Well, you're going to get probably your answer in our budget ad hoc committee update shortly, if you want to wait for that.
Sure.
We'll answer it in that. If we don't answer it, re-ask it then, and we'll get to
You
it.
bet. You bet. So what the director, harbor director is referring to is that tomorrow there is a meeting with the Harbor Advisory Board's Budget and Finance Ad Hoc Committee and the harbor director and the city's finance director. Then, as the harbor director, do you have any thoughts on how the HAB might move item 7 forward?
Well, I think the genesis of that item is, or was, if I'm not mistaken, and you can correct me if I am, the thinking of why we brought it up was, why doesn't the Harbor Fund share in TOT sales and property tax, because it's generated in the Harbor Trust, and isn't all funding generated in the Harbor Trust supposed to stay there? Are all revenues generated in the Harbor Trust supposed to stay there? In talking to State Lands Commission, that it goes to the city's general fund is the norm, and it's not anything that's breaking a law or getting around the State Lands Commission leasing practices. That's, for lack of a better word, that's just kind of how it is in Tidelands Trust. My previous answer from the former finance director was, his reasoning was, and I don't know how much experience he had with the Tidelands Trust angle to it, was because we're not a taxing authority, we can't tax and collect taxes, and those are all taxes.
Yeah, and you duly reported that to us.
Right.
But I don't think this body considers the issue to be dead or moot, and so that hence my question: if you have any thoughts about how the HAB might move this forward. Otherwise, we will or we will deliberate ourselves.
Well, I mean, probably like a lot of things, government and harbor-wise, when we look to see how should we proceed, we often look to other harbors and other entities and see how they do it. My logical first step would be, let's find a Tidelands Trust that does collect those taxes and see by what mechanism it is and how it is that that's done that way. Because then you've got a precedent, which is, as you know, in law, you've got a precedent, you got something to go with. Otherwise, you're making it up as you go from the beginning, and that's hard to get moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's wise commentary. Any other thoughts?
No.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Do you have any specific information regarding item 12? Actually, I'm sorry, you already addressed that. And my next note says that if the department would be so kind as to update the note on item 12, the last entry on item 12. You already gave us that report, what the council has asked the department to do. And if you could just kind of update that on the matrix.
Well, regarding paid parking, we came up with a list and some recommendations on issues to be considered when the city gets to deliberating on paid parking.
That wasn't one of the 3 items that you took to council?
No.
Ah.
That was
Oh, I
boat
misunderstood.
storage in the triangle lot.
Oh, I misunderstood.
In my mind, that's different than paid parking. This, item 12 is
No,
paid parking
You're
on the
completely
Embarcadero,
correct.
Embarcadero.
Yeah, I was just thinking about paid parking in the triangle lot, but no, you're completely correct. It's broader than that.
Okay.
Well, okay. So we need input from the community development director. That's where we are with this.
Yeah, eventually it gets in front of.
We need confirmation from the community development director that the planning commission and the council have been provided with the HAB's recommendations. And that's not your responsibility.
Correct, and Lori did bring that to the community development director's attention, and he assured us that it either has been presented or will be at the appropriate time, depending on which body you're talking about. I think we forwarded our recommendations to the council, so they've seen it, but once it gets to planning commission, I and the community development director will ensure that the planning commission has our recommendations and they move forward with it. And then we'll see if it's necessary to bring it back to the council again. Hopefully whatever needs to be done with our recommendations gets taken care of in planning commission, and then that PC moves on to the council.
Got it. Glacial. Got it. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Anything else relative to the staff report?
Yeah, I have a
Lynn?
question. Eric, I know the Harbor Patrol officers are running around the bay on the enforcement of current registration, current stickers, and they are putting little notices on those boats that do not have a current sticker on their boat. Will they be citing and thus incurring a fine if they do not get their stickers on at some particular date, by some particular date?
Eventually, they will be citing. As we always do, we take the educational approach first and just let people know, hey, you need to get this corrected. I believe it's a fix-it type ticket. Like if you I don't know. Like I shouldn't say that. I don't know if it is or not. It's like if you don't have your currently registered, if you don't have your sticker on, but you're currently registered, that's a fix-it ticket. It's like having a light out. You just got to replace it and show proof of that. If you're not currently registered, that could be a finable offense. I don't know.
But the fix-it type ticket, there is no fine or
Correct.
punishment.
Be my understanding.
they do.
And yeah, we're putting notes on people's boats, and because the funding that you pay to register your boat, X amount of it, and I forget the exact figure, it's a percentage, goes back to the Department of Boating and Waterways and pays for things like the engines that we buy for patrol boats and training and the derelict vessel abatement program. All that stuff goes to pay for the things that we all provide to the boaters. So, you've got to pay to play to keep your boat on the water.
Very good. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Brings us to C1. Update the Marine Services Boatyard Ad Hoc Committee and the committee and staff's recent activities. Do we have any public comment on this item? Seeing none. Dana?
Thank you. Well, the committee hasn't really anything been going on except for watching the staff's recent activities at the city council meeting
You could.
regarding what they refer to as the RV boatyard in the triangle lot. Some of the comments on the boat storage, just kind of go over this a little bit. First of all, some of the things that they brought up were security, screening with the fence, a higher rate, boats only, and I'll start with that. There's a bit of a zoning issue because it's marine-oriented, industrial zoned right there. And they all agreed that should be boats right there by the waterfront, which brings me to screening. Screening would reduce the security because then you couldn't see what was going on behind it, a fence. And the whole idea is there's boats right there. I mean, a car show brings a lot of people to this town. Well, you know, I just said earlier how having the submarine and the museum vessels on display right there, that's part of who we are. And that's what people enjoy coming to see at Morro Bay. So as far as viewshed goes, I don't see that being a problem. I see that being a big plus. Let's see, the other things that were brought up were lighting, but there's not really power there yet. Maybe someday there will be, and whether that happens or not. So anyways, there was that, and then just having been down by the Triangle lot most recently, we had a guy come by about a week ago. He has a 501c3. He's looking to build a boat. It's a nonprofit education thing for boat building. He's someone who's done quite a bit of that. Came from Port Townsend Boat Building Institute or whatever that is there. And he was looking for a place, and he thought that would be a great place to do it. So anyways, we had a pretty good conversation with him. Hopefully we'll get a presentation to bring to the Harbor Advisory Board someday. And other than that, I just don't have much else.
Thank you. Any questions for Dana? Bill?
From my recollection, we were working on an RFP, is that correct? Dana?
Correct.
And where is that right now?
You'll have to ask staff.
That is pending staff getting together with the ad hoc committee and putting that together, which brings me to the little deliberation that occurred at the city council on Tuesday night regarding the boatyard goal. There's a little confusion from the council in terms of where we were in terms of steps. Council had previously authorized, let's say, either $45,000 or $50,000 to go towards a financial feasibility study for the boatyard. Council wanted to see it brought back. Before we did that, we lighted on the idea, let's try the RFQ, request for qualifications, to see if anybody throws their hat in and maybe we can avoid financial feasibility. Well, none did for a number of reasons. Not, in my opinion, because it's a total losing proposition, but because it wasn't far enough developed along and too much uncertainty for anybody to throw their hat in the ring and say, yeah, I want to do this. So I think financial feasibility is still warranted. But I need to get together with the committee and put together a document and bring it back in front of the council for their consideration and get it issued out.
When are you going to do that?
As soon as I can get around to it. One thing I want to add to Dana's, not to cut you off, but I want to add to Dana's thank you for following up on the other concerns the council had on the Triangle lot for the boat storage. But another one of those was a recommendation that some degree of the funding and perhaps a significant degree of the revenues generated go back to the Triangle lot for improvements and upgrades and other things in the lot itself, and so sort of it's self-funding. Sorry, Ron, go. Okay.
Improvements for what purposes?
The maybe undergrounding the electrical that we've talked about that runs across there, and the improving it from a parking standpoint, the rest of the part of the lot, and improving obviously whatever we put into it for fencing and striping, whatever it takes to manage it, to self-fund it there, but for other things that could be used to improve that lot, and maybe not, stretching it a little further, maybe even some of the stuff in and around the Maritime Museum. But they thought focusing it back into the lot where it came from would be a good thing.
Thank you. Anything else for the ad hoc committee? Lynn?
Yes, it always bothers me when I see this fee-based boat / RV.
Mike.
sorry. It always bothers me when I see the boat/RV parking storage, for fear that would happen here before it even gets started, that RVs may be more lucrative and therefore displace the boat storage, as has happened. If you look down at Port San Luis, at one time there was a very large boatyard down there, and now it's a very tiny boatyard with a whole lot of RVs, great big rigs, parked on at least half of the property that used to be devoted to a haul-out yard. And I really don't want to see that here.
Well, your recommendation was boats, and only if there's space available after a certain amount of time, consider RVs. I think council really was primarily boats. They didn't want to see RVs at all, so.
Okay.
Yeah, the comments were looking at boats only with preference to local boats, starting with fishing and on recreational. But to begin with, letting the locals get in on the first. And also, a year down the road, maybe seeing if there was space available that they wanted to fill, and they did, they still, then possible RVs. But.
Okay, so that's clear in
Yes.
other contexts, but it just looks, right here, it does not seem that clear. But thank you very much.
Well, maybe next time around we'll cross out RV and just have boat.
Cross out RVs.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay, anything else on this agenda item? Okay. C2, update from the Finance and Budget Ad Hoc Committee. Any public comment on this one? Seeing none. Neil.
Thank you. And you guys segued into a couple of the items. And first, I'm going to look to the director for a couple status updates. We have not met as an ad hoc committee this month, but before we get into statuses, something that was also touched on is tomorrow we have a meeting with Jennifer Callaway, the new finance director. And so I'm going to be looking for recommendations for questions that we could bring up tomorrow. We're focusing on the cost allocation study, and as you saw and we just reviewed tonight, that it's one of our goals is for the city to do a gut check, and we want to see what questions you guys might have, and I can put out some of the questions that I've got, and Ron and Bill might share that as well, if that needs to help feed you guys with some other ideas. But it'd be helpful going into tomorrow's meeting to have a list of questions to make it as productive as possible. But first, I'd like to get a few status updates from the harbor director, and that might also feed some of your questions. So the first status update I was hoping to get was the harbor department's fiscal year 2018-2019 budget process. I believe there's a calendar, and I was hoping that you could give us an update as to where that is, and then within that update, if you could put in or inject where the HAB or the ad hoc committee would be useful, at what steps.
Okay, so I just happened to be prepared for that question.
Oh, good.
So the budget calendar, adopted budget calendar, which was brought in front of the council on January 16th. February 20th, the Citizens Finance Advisory Committee met and made some recommendations. February 27th, just this last Tuesday, City Council had a 10-year budget study session forecast, and 27th, we also did mid-year budget adjustments and recommendations. Starting this next week, first week in March, the Finance Department will start providing first their labor numbers and a basic budget outline to all the departments. And starting now, March through just about the end of March, departments are starting developing their internal budgets and bring those to the Finance Department on March 26th. Early April, we've got internal city budget team meetings, city manager executive team meetings again in April, draft proposed budget overall for the general fund and all the other funds, April 25th to the Citizens Financial Advisory Committee, and April 27th, tentatively delivering the first proposed budget to the City Council. And then May 8th, a budget study session, May 9th, a budget study session, May 22nd, if required, another budget study session, and then hopefully approve the budget in the first meeting in June, and if not, we've got the second meeting in June as a backup. So starting this month, we will be beginning to start developing our budgets with the data that finance gives us, in addition to using the 10-year forecast data. There's been some fairly significant changes in the PERS pension costs that are coming due over the next 4, 5, 6 years. Are going to be pretty significant. Those costs are going up significantly across all budgets, and that paints a fairly bleak picture for most people's budgets, including ours. So we're going to have to figure out how to address that. And revenues are looking relatively stable, not increasing like they had post-recession, but we seem to be fairly capped out. So looking for new revenue sources is going to be fairly critical to try and keep us balanced over the years. But we've got our 10-year forecast. I can present that to the committee at some point if you want to look at it. But it doesn't look great, but it doesn't look terrible. So how we weave the capital into that's always going to be the challenge, as we know, with just the snapshot we gave to the council here a few nights ago, over $4 million, and that was just 5 or 6 items. We've got a lot more items than that. So that's sort of the calendar picture of how it's going to play out over the next 2 to 3 months.
And then how would you involve the HAB or the ad hoc committee within that? Where would you see us? I mean, April 27th, if we haven't talked to you by then, your proposed budget will go to council without any recommendations from us.
So we're going to be, we've looked at the capital, although we're revising those spreadsheets, but we've run those through the advisory committee, through the ad hoc committee, and brought that to the Harbor Advisory Board, and you folks have generally approved the prioritization and the items we have on there in terms of priority cost. We need to drill down on a little more, but we want to do some rearranging of the schedules and make them a little more user-friendly. That's not going to affect the content of them. That's just going to affect how they're put together. So I've got that input on the capital end. Again, as we know, those all depend on how much we have in our accumulation fund, and given the Beach Street projects, which we're working on now and doing design engineering on, that's going to eat up probably everything we've got in our capital or in our accumulation fund, if not a darn large amount of it. So we're not going to have a lot left over to play with. So there's not going to be a lot to be doing on the capital end unless we can develop some other revenue or income on it. As far as the larger budget process goes, we've got early April to bring it through the Harbor Advisory Board in March as well, to run it through the ad hoc committee if there's anything we need to run through the ad hoc committee. But that's all operational budget stuff.
So then, in regard, you just touched on this again. Speaking to the city council, you gave them an itemized list, a short list. What do you think it would take to give them the entire list to see what the full picture is of what our harbor district's facing?
I think we just include that in our budget submission to finance to move forward with. I think we need a.
How far out does the current budget project? Historically, it has not gone as far as what I think Neil maybe just had in mind.
The capital component of it?
Yeah.
The actual document itself, the existing one, the not modified, completely modified one, only had 5 years worth. I have projected out on that document, if a set of slips, for instance, we said its useful life ended in 2030, even though the document itself only showed 5 years worth of data, the number in each column represents what it took to get to 2030, even though it didn't show them all, if that makes sense. So I've gone out with my expense projections for each individual item to the life of that item or the year in which it needs to be fixed, replaced, or done whatever needs to be done to. I've projected out whether that was 2 years, 5 years, 20 years, 30 years. So, but the document itself only went to 5. We're extending it out to 10, so it shows 10 years worth of itemized data, you can go to the bottom of a column and say, okay, in 2019, we need to put this much away, 2020, this much, 2021, and show that for 10 years worth. That is my intent to get put together with what you folks recommend and what you wanted to see.
And I appreciate, I mean, literally appreciate that. What I don't understand is whether that data will be part of the Harbor Department's FY 18-19 budget submittal to council.
Yes,
Okay, thanks.
I would intend for it to be.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, and then, so within that, do you feel like after you've gotten input from us that in regards to the projections, do you feel like everything's accurate at this point? Sorry, voice is going away. In regards to the maintenance, improvement costs, and replacement costs over time, what you would be submitting to them at the...
I would like to get more input and more refinement on the itemized numbers for each particular thing. You know, I did my estimates several years ago now, and they need to be updated for time, inflation, and CPI, if nothing else, and cost today versus cost 3 or 4 years ago when we put it together. And I'd love to get the ad hoc committee's assistance on helping with ground truthing some of those costs. Some of them are fairly easy. You know, replacement of a vehicle in 5 years, well, that's a no-brainer. You can do that pretty simple. But, you know, a major slip replacement 10 years out is a little stickier to project out what the cost is. And if I could get some ad hoc committee input into that and refine those numbers, we'd be great.
Are there additional resources available for that exercise, for that critical exercise?
Resources in terms of
expertise?
Yes, to ground truth, and I'm thinking more of big facility stuff like slips and piers and that sort of pilings and that sort of stuff, which we've got some expertise sitting at the one side of the dais here. We've got some other engineering expertise. I'm working on the Beach Street slips right now. At some point, that's going to come up with an engineer's cost estimate, which will be greatly helpful because it's taken into account a lot of factors. And there's other agencies that we can reach out to in their maintenance and engineering departments for data to kind of ground truth numbers that we're working with. Yeah, there is.
I'm confident that the ad hoc committee and the other members of the board would be interested in supporting that critical endeavor, and I would encourage you as the harbor director to organize a game plan.
Yeah, I agree.
Be creative about possible resources, and the first thing to do would be to figure out what resources are actually available, information resources are actually available, and then ask them to accept assignments. I presume there's no money available for this exercise. Is that correct? We can't hire somebody.
No.
Okay, that's fine. It is what it is.
Okay, so moving back over to unless you had anything else to say on that, or Bill? Okay. Regarding the meeting tomorrow with Jennifer Callaway, Finance Director, and our desire to gather some questions from you guys if you have any. The ad hoc committee's goal is to meet with the director and discuss the cost allocation plan. It's outdated, and she's now getting up to speed with it. I understand she has reviewed a copy of it, and we're not sure exactly where we're going to start, but we'd like to start with a list of questions so that we can be as productive as possible tomorrow. Simple questions that I have are, can we make adjustments to the plan as it sits, or do we have to get a new plan drawn up? We've requested the city do a new cost allocation study. It was done last in 2009, and I think became outdated 5 years later. But we've we've done exercises in the past where I think we got an office that was getting charged to the city fixed, and Eric has now taken on a project with the lighting, going and ground truthing the lighting. So that's one item within the long list of things to look at. And granted, they could go both ways, as we understand, but we're going to discuss issues like this lighting. But if we do come up with findings, can we actually make the changes? Is a question that I'm going to have. And Ron, do you have any other list of questions that you've started to formulate?
Well, I would encourage. I'd like you asking the board for its ideas for this meeting tomorrow, and I would encourage the board to think beyond the cost allocation. Anything that relates to finance and budgeting in the harbor that you think would be appropriate to put before the finance director. I mean, there's limited opportunities. It's a very busy individual, so limited opportunities. Strike while the iron is hot. Anything.
This notion of a harbor district is intriguing. I don't know whether you bring it up now or not, but it's intriguing. So.
That would be on the revenue side, I think, and that's a good point. My experience doesn't mean it's meaningful. My experience with bureaucracies, government entities in particular, not to mention corporate, is that sometimes it's useful to make them aware of a problem and then discuss solutions. Because unless we know we have a problem, then we're living in a state of bliss. Jeremiah, you got anything you suggest for our meeting tomorrow?
No.
Lynn? Dana?
I think you guys have the questions.
Okay. Neil, back to you.
Did you guys want to discuss any of yours, or is that needed? We can wait till tomorrow.
We can wait till tomorrow.
Okay. In that case, that's it for me.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Unless Eric has something.
Yeah, I want to add, unrelated to cost allocation, just an information item. Falls into the budget and finance world. Grants we're applying for and have applied for, and sort of a status, just maybe a feel-good item, if nothing else, since financing is always so doom and gloom. We've just applied for an NEP grant for $5,000 for spill kits, trying to buy spill kits for all of our marina and slip operators up and down the waterfront so they can have equipment on hand, and so that we've also got equipment that we can have on hand if something happens. We don't have to go out to our yard and drag it out. Applying to the cable committee for $10,900 for our Washington, D.C. trip. They've been great about funding that, so we're expecting some good funding from that. And applying to the cable committee for $100,000 for the ice machine. We've recently had a new refrigeration company come out and make an assessment of it, and basically the refrigeration system on it is old enough and worn out enough, and it's blown up enough that it's due for replacement. So it's going to be a spendy item. So we're going to see what the cable committee will do with that. Put that application in conjunction with the Commercial Fishermen's Organization. So hopefully that'll result in some funding. And then we've just been notified we get another $16,000 in vessel demolition funding from the Boating and Waterways. So that's, again, your 20 some odd dollars you pay for your boat registration every year. Some of that comes back to get rid of some of the junk off the water. So just some of the grants we're continually looking for. Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to C4, update from the Marine Sanctuary Ad Hoc Committee. There is no activity beyond what was previously reported when the regional director told us that there was no action moving forward. But you mentioned, Eric, that the Marine Sanctuary is on the Washington, D.C. agenda?
It is. We're going to visit with John Armour. He's the director for National Marine Sanctuaries. Mm-hmm. We're going to be discussing with him the status of the Chumash Sanctuary from Washington, D.C.'s perspective. Hopefully the stories match. And also talking to him about the Trident wind farm proposal. As that wind farm is cozying right up to the sanctuary and may even be moving into the sanctuary. So We want to get some
The
information.
proposed
from the-
sanctuary.
The proposed sanctuary.
Just a sec. Anything else?
Well, you missed item C3.
Oh, only C3? Oh, good.
Only C3.
Okay. Well, we can circle back to C3. No offense, Lynn. Jeremiah?
Excuse me, I just wanted to make a comment on the proposed sanctuary. They're actually in discussion with the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary currently to move their borders inside of the Monterey Bay National Marine.
They who?
They is Trident Wind and their partner. They have taken on a partner, a German oil company, and I can't pronounce the name. It's only its initials are. Oh golly, do you know the initials of that company? EN. There's two other initials on it. But in any case, they are a German oil company who is looking to dispose of their oil holdings and begin putting their financing to non-fossil fuel energy. So they
So
will
that-
be the finance and construction end of the project.
So that all sounded important, and it had something to do with marine sanctuary. Could you start over again and tell us all that again as it relates to a marine sanctuary?
Okay, I was making a comment. Your comment was that it was moving into the proposed sanctuary.
No, that wasn't my comment. I wasn't talking about moving anything. All I said was there is no Chumash marine sanctuary. There is a proposed Chumash marine sanctuary. That was my only point.
Oh, I thought you said there were.
No, that was my
Proposed.
only point. But you said something important, so could you repeat that, please?
So Trident Wind Energy is currently under negotiation. It's part negotiation, so they're still looking for areas, so it's basically still optional. And they are in talks with Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary and the West Coast Director to see about the possibilities of moving the currently defined wind project into the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary, which is adjacent to their current proposed area.
Got it. Into the presumably the southern portion.
Yes, correct.
That's interesting. I can't imagine. Okay. Okay, anything else on C4, which I took out of order, for which I apologize?
Certainly no apology is needed, especially as the committee has not met.
Wait, no, I'm still talking about C4. I'm still on C4.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Anything else on C4, which I took out of order? Okay, seeing nothing. C3, thank you for your indulgence. Update from the Eelgrass Ad Hoc Committee. Is there any public comment? Seeing none. Lynn?
The committee has not met. We are very much looking forward to any interaction with QEA on their proposal for eelgrass management.
As am I.
Neil?
Will they have access to the new Cal Poly research? Is there good? It says in there that they're just basically reviewing existing literature and science. Has that all been published and will be available? All the recent studies that were done?
I do not think it has been published. Lexi was going to let me know if and when it was published.
Okay.
So I have not heard, but I kind of plan on talking with Lexi fairly soon. They were down there yesterday doing a lot of work, pulling up eelgrass or transplanting eelgrass. There's some of the research was going on, so.
Yeah, but
With this coming up with QEA, then I think we probably have to get busy and at least update ourselves on that list of some 17 research projects that they had going
okay.
from starting last year through this year.
Okay. Yeah, I just was hoping they would have access to all that, the newest data for the Bay. I mean, that was a pretty widespread study, so,
Yes.
okay.
Okay. Anything else for Lynn? Seeing none? Now we're going to go to C5. C5 is update from the Working Waterfront Ad Hoc Committee on the committee's recent activities. Any public comment? Seeing no public comment. Oh, thank you. Staff report. Thank you. Mr. Dowder says that there's a staff report.
Well, my staff report consists of, as you know, we held that second joint subcommittee between the Planning Commission members and Harbor Advisory Board members back on January 11th, and distributed, and you have in front of you, I put it on the dais, the staff notes from that, our collated notes between myself and the Community Development Director, Scott Graham, put together our combined notes on Measure D and Working Waterfront, because now we're on a dual front on that basis. So just providing this to the Harbor Advisory Board as an informational item if there's anything we need to add. And then we have Thursday, March 22nd, tentatively on the books at 6 p.m. for a full joint Planning Commission Harbor Advisory Board meeting to go over these items and hopefully get to some final conclusion on what we as a joint set of bodies are going to recommend to the general plan, local coastal plan process as documentation or guidance or language that's going to be inserted in the general plan and local coastal plan. That is the extent of my report.
Thank you. Gene?
Yes, recently a complaint, a lease site owner in the Measure D area has made a complaint against me, claiming that I have a conflict of interest by serving on the Working Waterfront and Measure D Ad Hoc Committee. My response is as follows. I have been proud to serve with integrity and honesty to the Harbor Advisory Board for over 30 years. I have been truthful, filling out my conflict of interest financial statements every year. I have never once used my position on this board to influence any council decisions. In fact, most of my projects never appear before this board, but rather show up on the Planning Commission agendas. I did not assert myself onto this ad hoc committee. Rather, I was appointed by this board and appointed by this board to chair that committee. So, for whatever reason, for spite, resentment, or revenge, and upon the recommendation of the city attorney, even though there has never been a whisper of impropriety action, and to hold to the highest standards and integrity of the Harbor Department, the Harbor Advisory Board, and myself, I will recluse myself from the Working Waterfront Ad Hoc Committee. I do have a few public comment statements to make. There are a few things I would like to get into this discussion.
Could you identify yourself, sir?
Yeah, Gene Dowdy, Land Sea Interface, 201 Main Street. There are a few things I'd like to get into this discussion on the Working Waterfront.
If you could move a little closer to the mic, please.
One is in the Working Waterfront General Plan overlay that there is a clause that allows historical water-dependent uses to be considered when applying for a CUP. What I'm concerned about is that if a zone, one of the three zones, has a water-dependent use and it is considered an existing non-conforming use, and for whatever reason that business is stopped, then there's no vehicle for it to be reinstated within that zone. Two, the central zone should go down to the boat launch area, and the southern area should have a name change. My concern about the first issue is that, I'll give you three examples. One would be the cannery area there, Bill Martin Tony's area. maybe the Associated Pacific area in the central zone, and maybe the Morro Bay Oyster Company in the first zone. The cannery was previously a aquatic onshore area with a processed oysters, abalone, fish unloading. Associated Pacific area is a marine construction firm, and the Morro Bay Oyster Company is previously general refrigeration and machine shop. If any of those uses, existing or previously, were to terminate, I'm concerned that they may be considered a non-conforming use and would not be allowed in the future. I would want to make sure that that use is allowed within those particular zones in the future. Thank you.
Before you step down, sir, those specific uses or conversion uses in general?
Those, I'm concerned about any marine-related use in one of those three zones there, whether it be construction, whether it be aquaculture, any marine-related use. I would like to see within those zones remain as a use that's allowed in that particular zone.
Well, it's...
If there is a machine shop in the Measure D area, I would like to see in the future that there's also allowed to have a machine shop allowed in that area there.
Oh, I see. So you're talking about a prior established...
Any prior historical use. That's what I was trying to bring up.
I understand. Okay, I understand. Before you step down, any questions for Mr. Dowdy on his points?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's unfortunate. Extremely unfortunate that in that way this body, and as it relates to the working waterfront and heaven knows what else in the future, perhaps, that we would lose Mr. Dowdy's experience, wisdom, and input. So, moving forward with this particular agenda item that's having to do with the working waterfront, as the harbor director reported to us and has provided us with some meeting notes, the joint Planning Commission and HAB subcommittee meeting that took place on January 11th raised a couple of points which this body needs to discuss, not deliberate, but to discuss tonight in anticipation of the future joint Planning Commission and HAB meeting that will make recommendations to council and to staff regarding an update on the general plan and the local coastal plan. Those two items are, if you take a look at the handout from those notes, under working waterfront, item A and item B. So the first one has to do with, this was not a universal position on the part of the joint ad hoc committee, but it was brought up that the working waterfront mission statement that this body generated, which I gave you a copy of, back on June 1 of 2017, is too complicated and too all-encompassing. So let's take a look at motion A, which is the mission statement that's being referred to, and I would ask that you provide me with any input that you have as to how we might simplify that mission statement or make it more concise or make it more direct. And I'm happy to discuss that this evening. Also, you're welcome to provide me with your input on any future time, presuming it's in the next week or so.
Ron?
Yes.
If I can clarify something for a minute?
Sure.
I think, make sure we're talking about the same thing. So, we, as a subcommittee or ad hoc committee, you came up with a June 11 report, that 11-page report with motion A that had two parts to it. Actually, it had two motions. Motion A, which was the mission statement. As my notes reflect, and as Scott and I recall, the joint subcommittee between the HAB and PC was okay with motion A in the mission statement. What they thought was too complicated and too all-encompassing, quote unquote, was motion B, the land use list.
Oh, thank you.
They thought that's what was too long and all-encompassing.
You are quite correct. Thank you. And that's exactly what your notes indicate. So thank you. I was incorrect. So take a look at motion B, which is on the second page, the material that I gave you. Thank you, Eric. You're quite correct. Is there some way that we can make a more concise statement?
What was the exact complaint? It was too broad.
It's, quote, too complicated and all-encompassing, end quote.
If it's all encompassing, then who would we want to exclude?
Well, I think
Start that list.
some of the discussion from that meeting was that some of the attendees thought that it should be more general, that there's no need for it to list out a laundry list of uses.
Yeah, that's exactly what my notes had, was the laundry list, yeah. Yep.
And that it could be more general. And and my recollection of the discussion that the HAB had is that we had some concerns that if it was too general, that it would not have meaning. And hence, we came up with our laundry list to make sure that it was inclusive.
Yeah, I recall that, and the idea was not to have the ambiguities that people see in Measure D, where the language doesn't clarify what uses, correct?
Correct.
So
But is there something we can do to make the working waterfront land uses, our recommended statement, more concise?
You could use stronger language, sorry.
Oh, that's all right.
Yeah, you could use stronger language in the, when you could say marine-related uses, you could put something ahead of that with stronger language that it's a percentage, 90% of a lease site is supposed to be for marine servicing or, some kind of strength.
Well, no, wait a minute. This is about working waterfront uses.
So, but as I read.
So this is all about working waterfront.
Got it. Yeah, as I read this list.
And some aspects of working waterfront are not specifically marine related.
True, including tourism.
Right.
But this list, as I read, transportation, I guess, military activities. And that's our Coast Guard.
Outside of paring down the list, which probably the list was a legit list that everybody felt necessary with the listings on here, it would seem that that would avoid the problems they're having currently, or people are having currently with Measure D. I mean, I would think we would want to establish clarification, and that's what this does. So maybe they should be the ones to ask how we would streamline something and still be clear.
I would agree. I would agree about the language that we have here is very specific, and I think the problem is a lot of people in our town, outside of people who work on the waterfront, are unaware of all the different uses that go on here. So what may seem like a long laundry list is just an accurate depiction of what we have. So I don't know. I guess I could take this home and go through it and go through it. Might be able to take out a word here and there, but overall, I think it's what we wanted.
Okay, so let's take a poll so we can move this along. So Dana, I think you just stated your position. Neil?
Yeah, I agree. I would just want whatever recommendation to come back to us and not just them take our silence as non.
Well, I think the next time around, it's going right past us.
Yeah. So do we need to spend some time and drill down on this? I mean,
Or we maintain our position that these are the working waterfront land uses identified by the Harbor Advisory Board.
I'm comfortable with that. As I read just this, before we list off all the elements in here, the sentence reads, it's a long sentence, I'm trying to find the beginning, sorry. I'll just enter in where it says, Morro Bay along the waterfront within the city limits, infrastructure, facilities, and properties that provide access to Morro Bay, infrastructure, facilities, and properties that are used for water-dependent or harbor-related private, commercial, industrial, or city activities, including, and then the list begins. But before that list, it lays out water-dependent or harbor-related private, commercial, industrial, or city activities. I mean,
So are you suggesting that it could stop there?
essentially, I mean, that covers all the things that are in that list. I mean, are we trying to prevent, I don't want to pick on a certain, I'll just take one. What do we use in the past? A pancake house, as Eric has used. That's the most benign, I guess, item that this, would a pancake house be prevented? No offense to pancake houses, but is that what, that's, you know what I'm saying? If it's not a water-dependent or harbor-related private, commercial, industrial, or city activities, including tourism, and then the list goes on. Back to my first question: who are we trying to exclude? If we're trying,
Well, that's actually not, I don't want to go all the way back to that. That's going down a rabbit hole that we already went down.
yeah,
And we worked our way out of that rabbit hole with this motion. But,
Okay, fair enough.
but your point about potentially stopping this long sentence after the word activities, but still including the last sentence,
Yes.
that's something to consider. That's something to consider. Or another thing to do is to take the laundry list, if you will, and move it down into a second paragraph and say that these activities define infrastructure, facilities, properties, water dependent, and so on and so on and so on.
yeah. I hate to lose this body. I think that's an
Then
important
d-
word. that we
well,
use. So I'm still okay. I'm just, for the sake of the conversation, making that point to see what you guys. would
Okay,
hear.
but we're doing a poll right now, so we can
Okay.
try to move this along.
Got it.
Okay, so what's your position?
Same as Dana's.
Okay, Lynn?
I think it would be very helpful to separate that laundry list and put it in a separate paragraph where, when you're, number one, reading it, you come to the end, and then down below that, you have examples of, that include your laundry list, which is essentially the same thing you're saying. But by breaking it into two paragraphs, you do simplify it, I think.
I agree. I like the word definitions instead of examples, because that kind of got us in trouble in Measure D. That's one of the words that creates a problem, example. So that second paragraph could be a definition of
The
harbor-related
Your marine dependent.
activities are, include, whatever.
Okay, Jeremiah?
Yeah, I agree also with Dave's position.
Okay, we're there. That brings us to the second point, which has to do with the sectors. There was a desire on the part of this joint ad hoc committee to define, or better define, if you will, the various sectors. And Mr. Dowdy's points in public comment was that there should be a name change on the southern area. So let's talk about defining these three sectors for a moment. I don't really care what they're called personally, as long as they delineate a geographic area, and that the name seems to be appropriate insofar as GPLCP update, that the name of the sector would be useful in identifying what happens within that sector. So we don't know in the future what will happen with Measure D. So I would suggest we not call it the Measure D zone, but we call it something different. Previously we decided to call it the fisheries sector. Are we okay with calling it the fisheries sector? Because remember, it's not just commercial, it's also recreational. Okay, all right with that? Okay. And then the mid-section, which we called visitors section, I don't recall, Eric, help me out, I don't recall that the joint ad hoc committee had a problem with that label.
No, they didn't. I don't think they had a problem with any of the labels. My note on the visitors sector was I'm not quite sure how it ended up stopping at Mariners Park, which is that small little park between Associated Pacific and the Staro Inn. I think where it came from is that our lease management policy says that the southern water lease only zone is Tidelands Park South, and that's somehow somebody grasped onto that and thought, okay, if that's Tidelands Park South, that means everything north of that is the other zone, which is Mariners Park is a good place to put that. That's just my guess on it, but I think the launch ramp should certainly be included in the visitor sector in Tidelands.
Yeah, well, not just the launch ramp, but also there's the commercial morages there as well.
Yeah, the slips as well.
And it's a revenue-producing area. So, okay. So are we okay as a board with extending the visitor sector to include Tidelands Park? Or through, let's see, what is the literal definition of Tidelands Park in the city's mapping? I know where the fence is. The southernmost fence is.
I think it's the Tidelands Park launch ramp facility.
Okay.
And I historically think of Tidelands Park as the park, the grassy knoll and the restroom, and then the launch ramp is the launch ramp.
So we would say facility and adjacent dockage as well.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Well, there's a few different places, excuse me, that it seems to me there would be marks of delineation, and like the launch ramp would be one, but there's a handful of commercial boats south of immediately south. So there's a small park and a fence at that the new park down by where our boats are.
Yeah.
So there's a fence there. That would be a perfect spot because that encompasses the commercial boats already moored there.
Well, in point of fact, that's the southern end of the city's property in that particular location.
And the land,
because south of that is private property.
Yeah, I mean, I would call it the public launch ramp area, and then the next zone, whatever the name we end up coming up with, in its definition of where it is the quote-unquote water-only lease zone south of the public launch ramp, something along those lines. Then Well, if that's the water-only leases, that doesn't include the slips that Jeremiah's in and those. That's the public launch ramp area. So that's how I would look at it.
Water-only lease sites south of Tidelands Park.
That's generally what we call that area south of the launch ramp. From a leasing standpoint, we only control the water. The land is still public. I mean, privately owned. But it's still part of our working waterfront. It's not just the water now down there that's the quote-unquote working waterfront. The land is still too. It's just we don't own it. It's privately owned. But it's generally referred to as the water-only lease zone.
So water-only lease sites and immediately adjacent land south of Tidelands Park? I'm just chewing on this.
Yeah.
I mean, how far back from the water does the working waterfront, quote unquote, south of Tidelands go?
There's a zoning overlay down there that, although in most cases down there, the bluff that used to exist, it's somewhere along the top of that bluff where there's it's a commercial overlay. It's a residential zone down there, but there's a commercial overlay on it, and it starts at the historic top of the bluff. There is no real bluff there anymore because it's been obliterated by the development that's mowed it down. I don't say that in a bad way. It's the development that's happened from the Kolb's property on south has generally wiped out that bluff that used to be there, kind of north of the launch ramp, behind the launch ramp parking lot. You've got the bluff behind there. That continued on further south. Well, the development over the years flattened that out, but the zoning overlay remained. So there is a line on the GIS mapping program somewhere that shows where that commercial zoning overlay is, and that to me would be the logical place where the working waterfront would live, would be in wherever that commercial overlay still exists.
Is the board okay with, quote, southern sector, unquote?
I like that better than commercial sector.
Yeah, commercial doesn't really make sense anymore.
Are we okay with southern sector?
If I can ask, Eric, a few years ago, the tugboats in town wanted to move down to that southern sector. And since that time, I believe in that period, that was prior to the cannery's dock being demolished, right? Didn't they come up with something saying that no commercial enterprise will be, there was a line where no commercial enterprise shall work south of this line?
There was a public, limited public comment that claimed that commercial vessels operating south of the launch ramp was illegal, dangerous, and not allowed. And it was, in my estimation, completely false. They purported it was from a navigation standpoint as well, and there's absolutely no boat navigation restriction down there other than the size of your boat and what you can get down there. You can operate whatever you want down there. But there's a contingent of folks that claim you couldn't do that down there, and that the one thing they did contend, which is true, is that zone has been slowly converted more to residential. As we know, when Orville sold the cannery, that's gone away. The boatyard has been slowly shrinking. There's not much activity down there anymore, and so the commercial activity that used to occur down there is shrunk away. I think to Gene's comment, one of his fears or one of his concerns in his comments was that because the physical use, the cannery and all the boats down there, even though it was zoned for it, it is zoned for it, and that use was occurring, went away. Over time, that entitlement could be lost if it's not somehow set in concrete or otherwise codified to where it could come back up and exist into the future if it's no longer used. So if it's sort of a use it or lose it theory, and I think that was Gene's concern, that if you're not using it, you're going to lose it. Well, what if there's a time where it's not used for a while, then it wants to come back? And so I think it is currently zoned. You know, if somebody wanted to go in there and rebuild a wharf and open up the cannery again, I don't think there's anything to prevent them from doing it. From a zoning standpoint, from a legal standpoint, you can go apply for it and go get permits, and it's zoned for it. The neighbors are going to disagree because they're going to claim it's all a residential area, which it has sort of gentrified down there.
Okay. Anything else?
No.
Are you okay with
I just thought there was a city resolution or something.
Are you okay with southern sector?
Yes.
Okay, done. Okay, thank you. I'll codify all this and send out a memo to you folks, and that's how we'll represent it in the future. So that brings us to C6, review of revisions to Morro Bay Municipal Code, Section 5.56.020 for Harbor Advisory Board input on vessel impoundment. And before we get into, is there any public comment? Okay, seen, good. I was about to call you, Gene. Thank you. Is that for good luck? Okay. Staff report.
Okay, so bringing back another section of our rules and regulations. This was the policy section, which is the only thing that was unresolved out of that. We got definite direction on the other items that were in that grouping. Impoundment being the one that we didn't have definite conclusion on, so we wanted to bring it back. We had proposed some changes to the Morro Bay Municipal Code and our rules and regulations to use impoundment as a potential enforcement tool. Currently, we can only impound a vessel if it owes money, if it or its owner owes us money. And although our harbor rules and regulations states we can impound under certain other conditions, the municipal code doesn't match, and so technically we really can't impound other than if people owe us money, or we're impounding a boat to perfect a lien, which is, again, a money owed thing. Tools where it may be useful to impound a vessel would be instances of a boat being a threat to pollute or a threat to safety and security or welfare or other things, and we'll get into some language changes. So I'm bringing back some language changes. Harbor Advisory Board concerns from the first go-around were to ensure that we weren't bypassing due process or violating due process, that the impound procedure and under the circumstances in which it can take place be specific and defined, and again, to bring back more refined recommendations, which is what we're doing now. Just for a matter exercise of legality, I went into my handy-dandy edition of Black's Law Dictionary and brought out what the definition of impound means, and it means to place something such as a car or other personal property in the custody of a police or court, often the understanding that it will be returned intact at the end of the proceeding, or to take and retain possession of something such as a forged document to be used as evidence in preparation for criminal prosecution. So I think what we're proposing does fall within those two definitions. And so what I've got for you on the second page of the staff report is the city's current impound ordinance in black, and then red line changes, strikeout being obviously things that we'd propose to strike out, and underline being things that we propose to add in. And so going through that, striking out the vessel which doesn't pay fees is not being the only thing that we can do it under, would be what I'd be proposed is any vessel that is, 1, incurred fees or other charges that remain unpaid for in excess of 90 days. 2, represents in the professional opinion of the Harbor Patrol a threat to the safety, security, or welfare of the city facilities, harbor users, or the environment, which would entail or encompass pollution-type events or an unsafe boat or an unsafe boater and their boat, or something that threatens the security of a facility, meaning the boat is damaging a city facility, being one instance, or 3, somebody who chronically violates use time or other restrictions on city facilities, such as Tidelands Park or other slips. And then number 4, continues to use city facilities after having been denied use, and that denial of use could be for non-payment of fees, could be for previous chronic violations and such, and we tell them you're no longer welcome in our facilities, and they still come on, because as you know, we don't have a gate around all our facilities, and people can just come and tie up. And then number 5, vessels can be removed from a public waterway in accordance with Harbor's Navigation Code, Section 523, which gives authority under, basically it's safety and security type things, or a vessel that's been deemed, again, a public threat or a threat to the waterway is what Harbor's Nav Code Section 523 is. And then in the second paragraph, sort of outlining a towing procedure, an impounding procedure, and what can be incurred for charges, and then how and by what means we hang on to it and when we let it go, and basically let it go when the fee either has been paid or the threat has been abated, or if somebody that's chronically tying up that doesn't have permission to tie up anymore, is they found somewhere else to go, or the problem under Harbor's Nav Code Section 523 has been taken care of. So that's what we'll be proposing. And then currently in the existing code, and this is for vessels that owe fees, although the code doesn't really say that, current code, if somebody owes fees and doesn't pay them, eventually if we've impounded and they continue to go, we turn it over to the process for under California Harbors and Navigation Code, Article 4, Chapter 2, Division 3, for the standard boater's lien law, to lien the boat and sell it at auction to try and recoup some of our losses. And then paragraphs B and C are what was in the existing code, and I just separated them out a little better to make it read a little easier. So that would be what my recommendation, or what our recommendation of a new and improved impoundment section of the Muni Code would be, and then we would make sure that our rules and regulations were more harmonious with the Muni Code, which it currently isn't.
Thank you. So the way I'd like to do this is for each of the board members who has a question regarding the proposed changes or has something to offer regarding the proposed changes, do so on an individual basis, starting with Jean.
I would emphasize to the city attorney the word may, that it says the harbor director may do different things. I would rather see the word may than shall, because this is still Morro Bay, where we have some concerns for our boaters.
Where specifically do you see the word shall?
I do not see the word shall. I want to make sure that we maintain the word may. I don't want the attorney to put shall.
Oh, I see. Okay, well, apparently the harbor director agrees with you.
Yeah, I agree. We've got may, the first paragraph at the end, may be impounded, and there's another section in there, harbor director may authorize, yeah.
Okay.
No, I totally agree. I like flexibility.
Okay. Anything else, Gene? Okay, Jeremiah.
I just want to say thank you to Gene, point well taken, and I don't have anything else to add.
Okay, Lynn? Want me to come back to you?
Yeah. Yes.
Want me to come back to you? Neil?
I agree with Gene.
Dana? Lynn?
It's only on the paragraph 2, second part of A, towing fees and impound fees, past due charges, penalties, interest, blah, blah, blah. But are the impound fees listed someplace? Are the towing fees listed someplace?
Yes, they're in the master fee schedule.
They are in the master
Yes.
fee schedule?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I...
As are penalties.
Penalties.
Yeah.
I have a couple of macro questions first, please, and then some micro comments. What has been the range of fees charged by the Department of Waterways for lien sale applications? Section 503 and 504 of the boater's lien law.
Can you ask that again?
Sure. What has been the range of fees, if you know, charged by the Department of Waterways for lien sale applications, the applications that the city makes?
We hire a service to do it, to go through the process. It costs about $200. I don't think Boating Waterways charges anything for the process. Our service applies, it goes through DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles is who processes it. It's just in Harbors and Navigation Code that spells out how you do it. It's DMV that goes through the lien process, and we hire a service for $200, and they walk us through the entire thing, and if it all goes according to plan, at the end of 2 to 3 months, they come up with a lien date, and we try to sell it, and
The reason I asked that question, it's okay, thank for the detail. The reason I asked that question is because Harbors and Navigation, the boater's lien law says that the liened party may be one of their financial obligations may be to reimburse for the application fee. That's why I asked that question. But you answer my question.
and that's probably the $200.
You
'Cause
answered
when
my
we do
question.
our liens, we throw that into the total when we go to do the actual auction. What are we trying to sell it for? Well, whatever's owed, and all the other costs we lump on top as well.
Well, which brings me to my next question. As a lien holder, how has the city historically determined a liened vessel's fair market value as required by Section 507 of the code?
I believe the code, and it sounds like you've got it right in front of you, but it's if the value is above, and I want to say $2,500,
$1,500.
$1,500. If it's above that or below that, it slightly changes the process by which you go. Yeah, I think the lien service that we do takes care of determining that, whether it goes above or below $1,500.
Yeah, but that's not my question. My question relates to how the fair market value is determined.
I believe the lien company determines whether it's above or below that threshold.
Section 507 states, and I don't have any expectation that anybody would have this memorized, truly. Sub B, at the time a lien holder applies to the department to conduct a sale under Section 504, the lien holder shall submit with the application a declaration by a licensed yacht and ship broker, seems problematic in and of itself, of the fair market value of the described vessel at a specific date within 30 days of that submission. So that's, do I understand you just say that the city just...
Is that for the over $1,500 value vessel? Is that the section that it's applying?
The $1,500 thing has nothing to do, according to 507, has nothing to do with that.
I wish I had all the code in front of me, because
That's okay. Nobody. There's no expectation that anybody has this memorized. So.
Because there's several sections under Harbors and Nav Code under which you can lien a vessel.
Oh, well, the only one that you have in your hand there is the boater's lien law, which may not address what you have in mind. And I don't want to bog the process down with my question, actually. So.
Now that I've taken away from you, you were looking at Section 507, is that correct?
507, yeah.
507.
Yeah. Eric, I appreciate you taking the time to look at this, but this is not, my question doesn't justify your time or the board's time or the public's time, so.
Well, the only answer I have for you at this time, without having everything in front of me and knowing exactly what our lien service does, it's my understanding that the lien service determines that.
Or has it determined, given the
They
lien
have a
service
determination.
presumably is not a yacht and ship broker.
Well, they could have one.
Yeah.
I don't know by what means they do it.
Yeah.
It says it does not be based on a marine survey.
Yeah, I got that. Okay, I'm content, and I actually apologize for taking that much time with
That's
that question. My next one is, how does the city handle the collection, storage, and return of personal property on a lien vessel?
General first order of process is when we lien a vessel, if we've impounded something, most of these, and I'll back up a second, most of these vessels are not in good shape, what I'd probably call derelict, junk, that people shouldn't be owning boats, have bought boats and end up on our piers, and they end up disappearing and stop paying. But if it's a vessel that we've impounded, and there's not many that people are actively using that we impound, but if it occurs, we allow them to take their personal property off at the time we impound it. If they don't, if we end up going through the whole lien process and we lien it, and we end up either selling it or nobody shows up, which is usually the case, we'll allow the people that did own it to come get their property if they show up. If we've got contact information from them, we'll try and contact them and say, hey, come get your stuff. And if some certain amount of time goes by and they don't, it just goes with the boat.
Okay, thanks.
The less stuff there is on it, the better for us, because that's just more junk that goes to landfill and we got to destroy it.
Thank you. As it relates specifically to the Harbor Department's recommendations relative to the impoundment section, the item number 3A3 is chronically violates use or time restrictions on city facilities, and I think Lynn partially addressed this. Are those clearly published and/or posted someplace?
Clearly published in our rules and regulations, posted, yeah. I mean, Tidelands Dock is probably the main place where that occurs.
Okay. And in the second paragraph on A, I have a suggestion, and that is that in your proposed new language, which says and or sub 2, the threat to, I might suggest you consider the inclusion of the word until after and or.
So so the first part of that red section in the middle of that paragraph?
Yes. And/or until, comma.
Okay.
Likewise, the and or, comma, just before sub 3.
Okay, so there's 3 of those and/ors.
And sub 4.
Okay.
I just
So
suggest it makes it a little clearer.
put an until right after each of those and/ors. Okay.
That's it. Okay, anything else from us? Okay, do we endorse, and that's all I think we're being asked to do, do we endorse these changes? Yes. Okay. Gene?
Do we make a motion on this?
I don't think so. We're not actually in a position to approve or disapprove. I think
I'm good with it.
Are we okay with this?
Yeah.
Yeah, consensus is fine.
Okay. All right, you have it.
Thank you.
Okay, so that brings us to declaration of future agenda items. And before I ask if there's any additional, I would ask the department, who's kind enough to maintain this for us. It says creation, one of our added items was creation of an Embarcadero Business District, and if we could add the purpose that we determined for that, the words "to fund harbor infrastructure." I would appreciate that.
So noted.
And then I have, before I ask for new ones, I have a suggestion to the board for relative to the declared item BOEM update. That's actually specific to an operator and really, I think a more appropriate would be modify to wind energy generation off the coast of Morro Bay or something like that. I'm sorry? Well, no, we were specifically interested in wind energy on this particular item. So if no one has any objections, then I would suggest we relabel that to wind energy generation. Okay?
So noted.
Thank you. Okay. Does the board want to add any additional declared future agenda items? Dana, no? Neil, no? Lynn? Jeremiah? Jean? Okay. That's it. Motion to adjourn? Moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. Thank you. Jean didn't vote. Are you abstaining from the adjournment vote, Jean? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.